Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the briefing room. I'm your host Abu Hamza, and with me is my co-host Samira Ahmed. Samira, what do you have for us today?
Right, well, this week, the Somali federal government's foreign minister, Fawzia Yusuf Haji Aden, recently participated in a 3-day emergency visit to Juba, South Sudan, as part of a high-level delegation consisting of the foreign ministers of IGAD member states. Foreign ministers from the 5 African countries consisting of Kenya, Somalia, Uganda, Djibouti and Ethiopia were dispatched to the conflict zone by the Intergovernmental Authority on Development in an attempt to mediate the ongoing South Sudanese conflict. Now, the ministers were accompanied by the African Union's Commissioner for Peace and Security, the United Nations Special Envoy to the African Union, and they aim to prevent the new nation from plunging into another ethnically motivated civil war, and they were trying to facilitate peaceful dialogue among the stakeholders of this crisis. Now, the Somali foreign minister joined her East African counterparts for what seemed to be somewhat of a productive meeting with South Sudan's President Salva Kiir. However, it seems that Ms. Aden's participation in the peace delegation has raised a few eyebrows. Check this video out.
Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, Uganda, Djibouti, Sudan, and South Sudan, all under one roof. The agenda: to resolve the crisis in South Sudan that is threatening the region's stability.
We have no time. If the present violence continues, and the violence on the ground leads to atrocities against civilians, it will create global dynamics.
Now, Hamza, I know that the Deputy Prime Minister's presence has caused somewhat of controversy. We've had a few articles that have been circulating the internet at the moment. One in particular calling IGAD a joke for even inviting Somalia to participate in this peace delegation. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've read the article, and after reading the article, my initial thoughts are, okay, one, the article was quite biased. It was leaning heavily against the government itself, and I feel that it's come to a point where we no longer support each other or criticize each other constructively. But having said that, there were some points in the article that did make sense, and one of those things was it's very difficult to try and build peace within other nations when you haven't fully sorted it out within your own nation first. And it's like, you know, okay, if you want to fix anything, fix your own house first, clean your own house first before you go and meddle or deal with other people's dirt. So that's on one side. On the other side, I appreciate that the Somali government is right now trying to get back into the actual international diplomacy of things. And become an active member within, you know, the world countries, and to do so, obviously, I have to be able to facilitate these kind of moments and facilitate these kind of meetings. So, in itself, on one hand, they had to do it, but perhaps it wasn't time yet. And on the other hand, it's kind of like, well, it's what experience do you have, because it hasn't really been working so far for our own country. So it's mixed messages, and I have mixed feelings about it. But initially, I'm kind of like, the article itself could have been better written.
Well, actually, just as a disclaimer to our audience, I would like to point out that the blog did actually show up on an Ethiopian news website. So that may have a little bit to do with the bias of the article itself. But for me, I see this as a very important diplomatic exercise. This gives the Somali federal government a real opportunity to kind of participate in the peace dialogue in an ethnically charged conflict. So this will definitely be a learning curve for them. So it's not necessarily about the issues that they're having on the ground. Yes, we know that there are a lot of problems going on at home at the moment, and even though they don't have their house in order, they are perhaps, you know, actively trying to take steps to learn from how these peace negotiations work out. So for me, that's definitely a good thing. In terms of them being invited to be a part of this peace delegation, it kind of should be viewed as a gesture of respect, as a gesture of acknowledgement of this new government, and taking it as a serious stakeholder within the region. So again, for me, you know, I would take that as a positive move forward in terms of the way the international community is actually looking at Somalia. And I can see that you're raising your eyebrow there. Perhaps you disagree.
That's not how it's coming across to me at all. I mean, I appreciate that it's what they term an ethnically charged conflict, but why does it need to be about ethnic. I appreciate that it's one side versus the other, but it's not. I don't like to see this as a tribal thing or as an ethnic thing. I feel that that's how it's being painted right now, and there's some elements of it in there. But like always, like pretty much every other conflict, it's about two things: resources and money. It's just who's got control of those two things within the country, and who's gaining the most out of it. So I know that they're using this whole tribal aspect or tribal perspective and ethnic perspective when they're trying to post this in the media, but I don't really feel that that's what it is. I feel this is just an argument over resources and money and who's getting what. And right now, obviously, whoever's in charge is going to make sure that his or her people, or those who are they favourite, will get more resources and more money and get all the positions that they want. That's the way that I see it. Now, if it's about money and resources, then they need to stop just talking about all these ethnic things, because if it's about those two things, then you should tackle how the actual resources have to be divided up within the country. And this is, again, something that can only be done internally. Anything that you do with external forces when it comes to a country's internal resources will just end up in further conflict, because anyone would just look at this and say, well, actually, they're just meddling because they want to get involved and find out what piece of the resources they can get, what pieces of the money they can get. And that's what's very dangerous about meddling in the country, especially a somewhat new country, recently and reasonably new. And it's once you start doing that, then the dangers are that you have external forces, even though they're trying to help, from the other side, they might actually be meddling and fueling the conflict. So the actual peace negotiations right now that are happening, well, in principle, they're quite nice. In practicality, I don't think they will have much of a positive impact. If anything, they might have a negative impact. And from the perspective of the Somali government being invited to come in as a term of respect or as a term of anything else, I don't think that's even the case. I think it's more along the lines of, hey, come along, we'll show you how the big boys do it.
I mean, either way, I mean, there are many factors that are involved in this conflict, and I think obviously the narrative that is currently being used in the media, you're definitely right, is that of the tribal ethnic tensions and whatnot, and resources and money does always play a big part. But I would really like to see it as, IGAD and the other neighbouring countries maybe having more respect for Somalia. And to me, I would like to take that as an acknowledgement. There would be no purpose for them to participate at the end of the day if it's not going to be beneficial for them or for the South Sudan at the end of the day. What would the purpose of the trip be at all?
But this is the thing. I feel, and I think this is the next story, actually, this would be a really good point to talk about the next story, and it shows the amount of respect whether or not the Somali government's going to get.
Well, actually, you raise a really good point there. Political life just does not seem to be getting any easier for President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. Still mourning the loss of his unsuccessful relationship with the former Prime Minister Abdi Fattah Shirdoon, the President of Somali federal government received yet another blow from Kenya when he was snubbed at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi. Now, although the President Uhuru Kenyatta was away in Juba for the peace reconciliation talks, the Kenyan protocol indicates that heads of states should be received by their counterparts or high-level officials. However, President Mohamud was instead met by IGAD's envoy to Somalia, Mohamed Abdi Afe, and Somalia's ambassador to Kenya, Mohamed Ali Noor. Now, Hamza, do you think this is actually a snub? Do you think it was intentional?
Well, okay, I think the article itself might have over-exaggerated things a little bit, but there's an underlying message there. The message is, okay, look, yes, it'll be nice whenever you come round, but we're kind of too busy right now, so we'll just get somebody else to meet you. And it wasn't even a delegation from Kenya themselves. It was a delegation from the IGAD delegation. It was the envoy and the Somali ambassador. So there wasn't really a Kenyan representative coming there to meet him when he came to the airport, and that to me is a term of disrespect. If any other president had come at any time, it doesn't matter how often they come. They can come 10 times a week if they want to. Anytime that they come down, you have to greet them in a certain manner. And I feel that right now, perhaps we could be reading a little bit too much into it, but it shows that there are some tensions that are occurring right now. And to me, this is more along the lines of, if we don't change the perception that the president and the nation has by any political or socio-economical methods, then you're just going to be played around with by any other country, even your neighbouring countries.
Now, obviously, historically, Kenya and Somalia have had very difficult relations. But do you think this is specifically another diplomatic tension that's occurred post the Westgate atrocities?
Well, this is the thing. They seem to be united in trying to fight Al-Shabaab. And all these messages seem to be, that they put out in the media, they seem to be a very united front. But I don't really think that the methodology being used right now is fully agreed upon. And I kind of think, Kenya is just trying to do whatever they can to make sure that their interests are protected, and Somalia is not in a position to argue much with that. And I think that's the way it is. And it's kind of like they're trying to just make the best out of a bad situation. So Westgate definitely made it a little bit harder. It gave Kenya more reason to actually stay within the Somali borders and to actually continue getting involved in its affairs. But yeah, it's again, like I said before, it's like, look, we are the big boys. Come, we'll show you how to do it, but you can't really say much back. And if we have time for you, we'll come see you. If we don't have time for you, then I'll see you in a couple of days when we go over to South Sudan.
Yeah, it's not looking really too good for the Somali federal government at the moment, is it? No. But let's keep positive. Hopefully 2014 will bring a lot more warmth and friendship from neighbouring countries, hopefully.
Inshallah, man. I really do hope so. It's one of those things that I just think to myself, you know what, everyone says this whole new year, new me thing, and I'm kind of like, well, if the heads of state did the same thing, it would be kind of cool. You might get a new perspective on things, and perhaps some of these peace delegations that they're trying to do within South Sudan, if they could start doing it within the country themselves, it would be a good start.
Oh, inshallah, we wish them the best anyway.
Inshallah.
Okay, and on that note, I think we'll leave it there for now. We'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the briefing room. For the second half of the show, we'll be discussing Puntland's election scheduled to be held on the 8th of January in the capital of the autonomous region, Garowe. So Hamza?
Well, I really liked the way these elections so far have been happening. Yes, there have been some difficulties in regards to some media freedoms and the way that things are really going on. But all in all, as a total process, I felt that it's gone really well. I felt that the way obviously President Farole met with his predecessor to discuss things and see how things are going, I thought that went quite well. I felt that so far the way that the preparations for this have been coming along have been going on quite well. Yes, it's a year late. It should have been happening last year. Yes, there are other aspects of it that many people are not happy about when it comes to who chose the actual vetting of the new political parties, the way the new political parties were being set up, the way they were written into the constitution. There are quite a lot of aspects that can still be changed. But as a general overview, it has gone without too much ado, and perhaps this is because there are many other things happening sort of across the actual territories and the Somali Peninsula. But I thought this is going quite well. It's quite exciting to see obviously who's going to win the actual elections. It wasn't surprising that the previous Prime Minister, Abdiweli Gas, had actually announced his candidacy for Puntland. It wasn't surprising at all. It was expected, but in my opinion, I feel we're gonna find out the results in a couple of days when the elections happen. But I feel that President Farole has got this in the bag. I think he'll be here for a few more years.
Okay, well, let's just focus on President Farole at the moment. We've seen two camps. We have those who are supporting him at the moment, who are praising him for his successes in battling the piracy issue, managing to keep Al-Shabaab away from the country. Although they have been also criticizing him in terms of his economic policies and not really doing too much, but still, managing to praise him for the efforts that he has actually, the successes he's actually had over the last few years. Then we have those who are anti him, who actually have been criticizing criticizing him for being a little bit dictatorial in a sense. Do you think that he has a firm hand and he's actually led the country to success, or is it just a coincidence in the support of the international community that have actually led to some of these issues being resolved? Or do you think he is just ultimately this dictator who wants to oversee everything, including the vetting of the candidates in this upcoming election?
Well, he has a background in finance, a background in banking. So in terms of economic and monetary policy, I feel that he's done quite well because he hasn't needed to print new money necessarily to constantly keep things going. He's kept it quite firm. The economic growth has been really small, if anything. But in itself, it means that there was no bigger debts and they weren't dependent too much on other regions. They were quite self-sufficient in that aspect. And yes, they were getting quite a bit of money from the international communities, and they obviously, when they were fighting or battling the piracy issue, obviously some of the other issues that were going on. So in that aspect, it's quite okay. In the aspect of media freedoms, I feel that it's been a little bit too dictatorial. I feel that there hasn't been enough media freedom. It's like almost anyone who kind of spoke out to say anything bad for a long period of time was being arrested and then not detained really long and obviously let go again. But there were forms of intimidation there. And forms of intimidation obviously have the impact or the effect of self-censorship afterwards, where not many people will write about this. And this is when even some local elections were going on, like about 2 years ago. Similar things were happening against journalists from several media organizations, whether they were based in South Central, whether based in Puntland, or whether they were based in Somaliland. So in terms of media freedoms, there's a lot of things that can be improved. But as an overall thing, I feel those who are in the anti-camp just want change. They just want to see something different. And you have to remember, change isn't always good. Change isn't always going to become a positive change. Change isn't always going to become the change that you think it will be. Now, whether Abdiweli is a better fit for Puntland, you have to look at experience, and Abdiweli has done very well in his position as the Prime Minister for the 1 year that he had the tenure for. And within that time, he made a lot of preparations and he set up the systems in a way that would allow other things to be built on top of it. So he was very good at building foundations. And as an intellectual within that capacity, he did very well. He had a very strong team around him. And I feel that he performed quite well at his job. There's no one who can really complain about Abdiweli's methodologies and the way he did things during that 1 year tenure. Whether he can do the same thing when he's the president of Puntland, however, I'm not too sure about. I feel that when it comes to the experience that Forola already brings to the table, it's very hard to go against an incumbent. But if you go against an incumbent, then you have to show very quickly all the different policies and things that you want to show and things you want to change. And even though it would be nice to have Abdiweli in such a position, I feel that Forola is still going to win. I feel that he has enough supporters behind him right now to be able to do this.
Okay, so if we just carry on with that prediction there, if the people do actually elect President Forola once again, how do you see his leading the country's position in terms of its relationship with its neighbours? Now, we know that obviously it is an autonomous region. They've cut off ties with the Somali federal government as of August 2013. Do you see that relationship being rebuilt, or do you see Puntland wanting to continue that autonomy and completely cutting itself off permanently?
No, I think in terms of the ties that have been broken, certain pressures will be built where they will compromise and they'll come together at the table and things will be changed, and they'll come back together again in terms of working together. But when it comes to him leading the country for another few years and leading Puntland, whether that's best for Puntland itself, if it's in the same way that's been going so far, then I don't know. But another term gives him the chance to finish off some of the things that he hasn't been able to do yet. And perhaps that's the best way to do it. I mean, most presidents or prime ministers in the majority of countries around the world, they have been able to have the biggest impact on a nation if they've been able to secure 2 terms. And if not, you don't want anything that's been put in motion obviously to be changed automatically and be overhauled. So I think it's probably best if Farola wins. I think Prime Minister Abdiweli has the experience, but I don't think this is his time yet. I think there needs to be a bit longer period where things get built up in a certain way where he's able to just step in and he can take over and put his policies in place and improve Puntland itself for its people. But right now, it's probably better with Farole plus some improvements and some changes on there, of course. But yeah, no, in terms of in terms of the relationships that are happening with the neighbouring territories, again, I feel that currently, as it stands, the status quo is quite okay. The one thing I do like about Farole though is that he had an ambition. He had a certain group of people that he wanted to get involved with and help, and he has stuck to it. And that's something that is kind of undeniable. You don't see him running off to other places or doing anything else that isn't in the interests of Puntland itself. He's quite heavily protective of the interests of Puntland. Now, some people argue that that is protecting his self-interest, but it's also protecting the area where he's the president of, his nation's interest. So in that respect, I think it's quite good. He hasn't gone off to chase off other further dreams. How it's perceived, how Abdiweli chose obviously to go to Puntland, I don't know. People have mixed messages about it. It's kind of like, oh wow, okay, you didn't get the position that you wanted in Mogadishu, so you thought, okay, let me go to Garawa and try again. If that doesn't work, then you go the other way. And you see similar things happening in other places where politics has almost become very similar to a career, and you've got career politicians, and I'm sure that isn't the intention of Abdiweli himself, but this is how it will be perceived by a lot of people. And unless you can see real change and you stick to certain things, even if you don't get it, you stick to a certain region and you try to make changes, improvements on the ground itself, and then work your way up, that would probably be the best position. And this is one of the things I really respected Abdullahi Yusuf for. It's one of those things where he said, okay, look, I'm here for the people of Puntland, and okay, now I feel that I've done quite an okay job here, now I'm going to go to Mogadishu and try and make a change for the bigger areas. And you just don't see that happening very often. You see everyone just trying in Mogadishu, and if it doesn't work in Mogadishu, they go to all the different areas and try and work there. So it's one of those things where I feel like right now, we are better off where we are. Things can change. It'll be interesting to see what happens on the 8th of January. One thing I haven't heard anything about, and I'd like to hear something about this actually, is the impact this is going to have on Somaliland and the relations between Somaliland and Puntland themselves. Because will Abdiweli be better for Somaliland, or is Farala better? I mean, I don't know. What do you think in that aspect? Is it one of those things where you feel that if we keep the current status quo, things are okay with Farala, or because Abdiweli has done quite a few good things when he was in Mogadishu, and obviously in terms of facilitating the talks that are happening with Somaliland. So do you think this is better in terms of Somaliland taking its independence, or do you think this is just going to impact them worse and there's going to be more territorial disputes?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it will be interesting to see how this plays out. But for me personally, seeing Abdiweli perhaps take that role in Puntland, for me, may not necessarily be the best role, because for me, I've been questioning him again as a career politician. It seems like it's an opportunity that's there to abuse. So whether or not that's going to be beneficial to the people of Puntland or not, only time will tell if he is actually elected for the role. Now, like you said, he has, initiated some sort of dialogue between Somaliland, so that would be interesting. But at the end of the day, as an elected ruler, you have to take the people's interests and place those first. So whoever the president is, I would assume that the overwhelming majority would, want to perhaps steer away from that. And it would take a very strong leader to actually continue on with those negotiations and those dialogues. But we'll see how that works out.
Okay, now, I mean, it's one of those things where I think we can just wait and see. But the one thing I am very interested about, and the one thing that I think to myself will be very interesting to see develop, is the actual relationships between all these different regions, especially when it comes to certain leaders moving from one position to the next. And the very interesting one that we should watch and wait for is whether Ahmed Madobi from Jubaland, whoever decides to move away from Jubaland and go towards the next elections in 2016 in Mogadishu. And I think he would be a real contender. I don't think anyone else is as much of a contender as he is if he decides to go for it. So again, it's one of those things that I feel that we should look out for. It'll be fun. But for now, that was it. Thank you for watching for this evening. My name is Hamza. I've been your host, and I've got my co-host Samir Ahmed. Thank you for watching the briefing room.